Hello everybody, this is evangelist 𝗚𝗘𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗥 and I welcome you today to this episode of 𝗚𝗘𝗪𝗧. I'm joined by Matt McClusky, a man who took a simple vision sparked and watched God turn it into a global evangelistic inferno sweeping continents. Matt is the founder and the runner of the fire camps, Jesus camps, training evangelists who are now reaching millions with the gospel. His story will stir your faith and show you what God can do with a simple yes. He's a very dear friend of Catherine and mine and also the ministry. And today you will truly be inspired. So let's jump straight into it. Matt, before we get into, I believe, the global movement that you've been part of sparking, really, truly, that's not taking a mouthful. I truly believe that is something that is really fitting. But I want to hear a little bit your story. I want to hear, and I want you to share a little bit about your background, your personal journey to faith, and just like your early influences, and then we can take it further from there. So Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from.
Yeah, Daniel, brother, it's such an honor to be on this podcast with you. Really excited about the time. And yeah, I mean, long story short, I grew up in a Christian home. I remember receiving Jesus when I was 4 years old. I was kind of on the porch of our house, and my mom led me to Jesus.
Come on.
And, I feel like when those moments happen when you're a kid, these things that are imprinted upon your spirit, man, you still remember them often up here.
Yeah.
And I still remember that moment. And I remember my mom crying, and I was kind of excited too. I didn't know exactly what had happened, but I believe it was a real decision for the Lord.
Yeah.
And, when I began to be around 5 years old, I remember telling my mom, she remembers it as well, but I remember telling her, when I'm older, I want to get a horse and I want to get a wife and I want to go be a missionary. And so there was always this desire in my heart for ministry, I guess. And, I grew up in kind of an independent Pentecostal church, and,
Yeah.
we'd have services Sunday evening, Sunday morning, Wednesday evening that lasted for, 3.5 hours.
Wow.
And I remember even as a kid, just being there, paying attention the whole time, and enjoying that atmosphere, enjoying being in the presence of God. And, and also too, at the same time, I had this heart for Europe specifically.
Wow.
So, I don't know where it really came from.
So you're from the States, right? But a heart
Yeah.
for Europe started to emerge already in an early age.
Yeah. So I remember like being, 6 or 7 and watching The Sound of Music. It's a childhood movie that a lot of kids watch over here, and it's about Austria, right before the war.
Yeah.
I remember like just being fascinated with Europe, and even as an 8 or 9-year-old going to our little library here in Jacksonville, Florida, and finding like German picture books and memorizing words in German.
Yeah.
And this was always kind of on my heart. And then, when I was in high school, I studied German, and I always wanted to go. My grandmother is Northern Irish, and so when I was 13, I went to stay in Northern Ireland for 4 or 5 weeks with my second cousins.
Right.
So kind of always this heart for Jesus, kind of ministry. I'd say probably like everybody though, in high school, it was the late 90s, and there was a lot of, atheism, agnosticism was kind of the rage, in high school, and kind of having to obviously delve deeper. And, we're always kind of making additional decisions for the Lord. There's
right.
different things, but kind of going through that with the Lord. And then, when September 11th happened when I was 18 years old, so I'm 42 now.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was a very patriotic time in America. This is how, we were at war and all these different things. And so I thought for a little while about actually going to work for the government, for
Okay.
15 or 20 years, and, kind of the idea of serving, but then taking, the wisdom that I would learn, in one of the intelligence agencies, and going to work, helping, the underground church. And so
Wow.
kind of began that process, but then realized I don't want to do that. I realized as I found out about exactly what that work would look like, I realized that's not really what I want to do. And so I ended up getting my master's degree in Russian studies. And so
Wow.
kind of came out, I'm 22, 23, 24, getting my master's degree. And then when I was 23, I believe I was always filled with the Spirit, but I believe there was something that happened in me. There was such a clarity of thought
Right.
and such a deep desire that grew in me when I was around 23 or 24 to begin to spend hours with the Lord.
Wow.
And so I began to do that, as a 24-year-old.
Yeah.
Some interesting things to note though, by that time, a lot of people are going to be listening. They're younger than 24. A lot of people that'll be listening here.
Yeah.
it's interesting to think before that time, I had led maybe a small group in college a little bit, but nothing very big. There's many people listening that have done far more than what I had done by the age of 24.
Right.
But at this time, like really there was this marking moment, and I began to, again, I worked on one side, but I began to lead small groups. And what ended up happening was I lived in Kazakhstan for a year, and my desire was to learn Russian, and also too to see, okay, what kind of ministry are they doing over there? Like, what does it look like in 2007, 2008 to be a missionary in Kazakhstan,
Come on.
in Central Asia? And so I was over there, and then I ended up coming back to Jacksonville, and I ended up running into a Bible school called the Slavic Missionary Bible School.
Right.
And I say kind of at that time, they were a little bit kind of one foot in the old covenant, one foot in the new covenant.
Yeah.
SBS, the name of the school, it's a very special place even today. It's a beautiful meeting place of more conservative streams of thought, and also too kind of more charismatic streams of expression of the body of Christ.
Yeah.
But at that time, I kind of came in and I began to realize, wow, a lot of these guys, they know the gospel, they know they're saved by grace, but a lot of them think up here that they maintain their salvation through perfect works, or we call them the gifts of the Spirit, but really they're earned. And so kind of coming into this, as a 25-year-old, this young adult community, and I just began to realize, wow, like the Lord has brought me through a similar season, and I have different wisdom, and I just began to kind of go to the young adult ministry, like on the Sunday night gathering they had, and on Thursday.
Yeah.
And I just began, they had a prayer time on Thursdays, and I just began to kind of be there worshiping the Lord. But what began to happen is the Lord would begin to surface and kind of like highlight different people. A lot of times they were young guys my age.
Yeah.
And I began to kind of get prophetic words for them. So for a period of around 2 years, that's all I would really do. I would just kind of go to these prayer meetings, enjoy the Lord for myself. 26, 27, beginning to get little words for people. And obviously, sometimes those words would turn into, hey, like bro, like talking to me, hey, Matt, can I get lunch with you somewhere? This is hitting a nerve. Like, wow, how do you know that? Or like I don't know who God is as a father. I don't know who I am in Christ. Like, how do I find out more? And so kind of in these individual interactions, deeper conversations and friendships began to open up.
Right.
And so, so around 2 years into that, so I'm kind of talking about my journey. How did I get to Jesus camps? How did I get to fire camps?
Yeah.
And so I would say, after 2 years of that, the ministry school, they needed someone to lead evangelism on Mondays. So the school, they have 3 programs now, and around 200 young people come through every year. It's a dynamic place.
Yeah.
And it's really focused on Slavic Americans, so Ukrainian, Russian, Belarusian, kind of second generation Americans.
Right.
And so they have a 6-month program in the spring, which is a deeply beautiful program. And it's for kind of young people, and more generally, the summer, they have a 4-week teens program where they have 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds come for 4 weeks and just to encounter the Lord. It's a beautiful program.
Yeah.
And in the fall, they have kind of like a second level. It's called IDT. So there's 200 people kind of coming through the program every year.
Yeah.
And, they needed someone to basically lead evangelism on Mondays.
All right.
So Monday was kind of the day where they send out, pockets of people, like 15 or 20, the next week, another 15 or 20.
Yeah.
They needed someone,
Yeah.
and they didn't have anybody in their own community. And they were like, well, listen, Matt, would you want to lead this?
All right.
And so, And so for me, I would say I'm probably not, like Ephesians, 4 evangelist, like office, of the evangelist, but I love Jesus. I said, yeah, like, of course, like I'll help. And so, I just began to lead that, and I led that faithfully. It turns out for 8 years. So 8 years of taking out people almost every Monday for 8 years, on the streets. And, and in that, we're getting people that are going out sometimes. They don't even know if they're saved. They don't know what it's like to hear God's voice.
Yeah.
And so, at the beginning, like doing a 10 or 15 minute, like little teaching on, different things, so I could make sure that, hey, we're going out and it's not good news if we don't know we're saved, so they're really understanding what the gospel is, where they can internalize that. And so what ended up happening was that, eventually after 3 years of leading that. So again, I want you to picture, you're a young person. A lot of times we want to so get moving and whatever our calling is, our assignment.
Right.
But for me, my journey was very, very slow, you could say. But also too, it's important to realize for me, like this was my life. So what I mean is I wasn't doing this to then get somewhere.
Yeah.
For me, just showing up on Thursdays and like,
Yeah.
or who do you want to bless? For 2 years, that was my fascination, right? And then for additional years, it was okay. Like Monday night, it's my time with the guys. Like,
Come on.
how can I help them understand the beauty of the gospel more? How can
Yeah.
I and so really just treasuring these small moments. And so probably after 4 years of kind of serving more generally, again 2 years kind of just showing up, and then maybe 2 or 3 years of leading evangelism, the
Yeah.
school, they're like, hey Matt, would you want to come share for a few days on whatever it
Yeah.
is you care about, whatever it is you care. We know that there's
Right.
a lot of great things going on, would you want to share on that? And so I said, yeah, like I'd love to. And so that's where, I began to share more like openly on, identity in Christ, the goodness of God as a father, hearing God's voice, these messages that I've loved,
Yeah.
and I still love today. But I would say like before I ever shared them, in front of 50 or 100 people, I shared them one-on-one,
Right.
probably like 50 times.
Yeah.
And really where that was enough for me.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of times we're sitting there and we're thinking, I'm being underutilized by the king, or there's all this different things that comes from it, from a young heart wanting to live in a godly way, a life of significance. It's not a bad thing. But also too, sometimes we devalue the present moment and where we are, and we
Right.
want to find the joy in it. But for me, like it's enjoying every aspect of the journey. And so
Yeah.
so eventually I began to kind of share more broadly for 4 or 5 years at this Bible school.
Yeah.
And I was kind of, I was typically, the first month at these schools, I would share and kind of help them come into understanding God's goodness as a father, our identity in Christ, again, hearing his voice.
Yeah.
And I think probably for all of us that are listening, whenever someone teaches on that for the first time, or whenever you really finally take that in, it's deeply like meaningful for you. And you almost remember the person that brought you that. And so kind of at this school, like I was one of the main people bringing this message. There were others,
Sure.
great teachers that come every day, every week to the school.
Yeah.
But because of that, different relationships would open up. And then afterwards, a lot of these young people, they would then go back to their own communities and they'd begin to be youth directors and different kinds of things.
Come on.
And they would begin to say, hey, Matt, that message that you shared, could you bring that to my community? So
Yeah.
I began to travel a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so this was from like 2011 till 2020.
Yeah. Wow.
And we'll kind of, I'll get to kind of 𝗖𝗙𝗡 now. So basically, yeah, in 2020.
But did you during this period, did you have any kind of, I mean, you eventually started the fire camps. We're coming to that, and also Jesus camps right now. But did you do any kind of similar things in this period up until 2020, or?
Yeah. So I think it was 2017. The Lord began to give me vision for doing gatherings around the United States, where we would ask these young guys that had graduated the program to come for a weekend, or they'd be invited to come for a weekend and just to refresh with the Lord, to encounter the Lord.
Yeah.
And so, we did our first one in Orlando. I think it was in 2017. We called it Sons and Servants.
Wow.
And so this was the first kind of gathering that I had ever organized, and we just did it. We rented out a few Airbnbs. We had around 80 guys there.
Wow. Come on.
We were there for 3 days, and it was just a radical time of encounter, a radical time of healing for guys, new vision being released.
Wow.
And so we began to do these around the country, and it was just for guys. And then we launched something with kind of some young female heroes from the Slavic American world called Daughters of Servants.
Yeah.
We started to run that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the first time I'd ever stepped into kind of organizing something like this, on my own. And it was just kind of vision from the Lord. And so what ended up happening was in 2019, actually, I would say this. Okay, we'll kind of back up a little bit.
Yeah, go on.
So in 2018, it's kind of a fun story.
Yeah.
In 2018, we heard that there was going to be this big event called The Send in Orlando in 2019. And I think it was February or March of 2019. And in 2018, Lou Engle ended up coming to New Life Church here in Jacksonville and doing an event.
Okay.
Where he just wanted to get the word out. Hey, we're going to be doing the Send next year. We'd love for you to come. It's going to be a great time of bringing young people who need to encounter the Lord. Drive down to Orlando. It's 2 hours away.
Yeah.
And so I was sitting on the front row, and Lou Engle, like he's speaking, and like I think he says something like, "Lord, awaken the heroes," or something like this. And a piece of spit that flies out of his mouth. A little bit sick. But somehow I'm on the front row, and I think it like hits me on my head, and I feel it hit my head. And it's funny because at that moment, when that little piece of spit hit me. You know, I love Lou Engle, but it's not like I try not to idolize anybody in the kingdom. But I would say, you know,
Sure.
like I probably love and respect even other people more than Lou. So this isn't some kind of like imagination that's, you know, or fascination that's, you know, kind
Yeah,
of taking off or
sure.
leading. So this, you know, anyways, this happens.
Yeah.
And as that happens, I get this idea. You know, I have a friend down in Orlando. His name's Daniel Mironachenko,
Yeah.
and he runs a community called Soul Schools and Ecclesia.
Yeah.
And got the idea that we should have a week-long school leading up to the Send, like an encounter week,
Mm.
where we invite Slavic Americans in our friendship circle to come
Mhm.
for a week and actually join the evangelism events before the Send.
Yeah.
So it just kind of comes to me this immediately.
Well,
And so, yeah, so I called Daniel. I'm like, bro, like we should do this thing. We should do like this week-long thing. Let's just invite people, rent some Airbnbs out. Again, I knew how feasible it was because we were doing it for 2 years, kind of with these, you know, these guy gatherings, these sons and servants gatherings.
yeah.
So we decided, let's do it. So we did it, and it was just deeply impactful. It was
Mm.
it was family, it was beautiful, and you know,
Mm.
the Send event was very special.
Mm.
So that what that led to, that's the success of that led the summer of 2019. Maisie and I, my wife and I, we were planning to go to Germany for a week,
Mm.
and to be, oh sorry, for actually around 6 or 7 weeks. And we decided that what we could do is get together with all of our German friends there, you know, people that had done YWAM, that had come through Jacksonville,
Yeah.
David 𝗏𝗏𝗪𝗏.
Yeah.
You know, we invited also Daniel Mironachenko and Irina Krylenko
Yeah.
and some other people to come over and basically do an encounter week. And so that was the first time we ever took this international. And we called it Jesus School. We didn't know another name for it, but we called it
Yeah.
Jesus School.
Yeah.
And it was in Black Forest. It was outside of Villingen-Schwenningen. And basically, you know, we just invited 10 or 15 people that love the Lord, you know, kind of like me, just friends. And
Yeah.
then there was around 50 young Germans that were there.
Mm.
And the Lord came so powerfully in that time.
Wow.
It was a beautiful encounter week. All right. So you have kind of this track of, okay, you have sons and servants, daughters and servants. Then you have the Send, you know, gathering, you know, the week-long gathering. Then you have Jesus School 19. So that's kind of traveling on one pillar.
Yeah.
On the other pillar, you have, you know, I've been serving at SMBS for 7 or 8 years.
Right.
You know, yeah. And again, I was serving as a volunteer. I was still working, but I had kind of flexible hours, so I was there a lot. So what ended up happening was in 2020, Evangelist Daniel Kalinda, again, he's the successor for Reinhard Bonnke. He runs Christ for All Nations. It's
Yeah.
an international ministry, a great ministry. So he started what he called the evangelism boot camp in the spring of 2020, and he invited, you know, 50 people kind of to be in Orlando for 6 months, and his heart was to really disciple them, and really where afterwards they would feel fully empowered and equipped to do crusade evangelism all around the world.
Yes.
So they had 50 students that were in that program, and 5 of them were Slavic Americans that had kind of been through this school or that knew me in some
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And so during that spring time, Daniel really got to know these guys. He had lunch with a lot of them, and he really loved the Slavic Americans that he kind of came into contact with. So, you know, one of them was Denis Артюшевsky, David 𝗏𝗏𝗪𝗏,
Yeah.
you know, Andrew Rivko,
Come on.
you know, and Evelyn Sman. So there were some great heroes, and I guess somehow in their story, like you know, when he got to know their kind of discipleship story, their journey, I guess my name had come up a few times. It
Yeah.
would seem. And so, you know, the summer, you know, the spring happens, the summer happens, and then basically Daniel had asked Evelina Sman to organize a Zoom call for, you know, Slavic American leaders, people who knew a lot of young people from that community, because he wanted to really invite them to invite their people to come to the next boot camp.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I was on that call, and basically, you know, at the end of the call, Daniel said, hey, listen, this isn't just about, you know, you helping me. Like, if you guys have a heart to raise up evangelists in Europe, you know, in Russia, in Ukraine, wherever, like, know that I'm willing to help you.
Come on.
And so, you know, I had already had this kind of thought of, you know, Jesus School 19 that we did in Germany. I had this thought about maybe this could be a cool, like, wineskin or encounter week for CFAN to do.
Yeah.
And so I just felt led in the moment to kind of raise my hand and say, hey, Daniel, like, I've got an idea. You know, I explained it very briefly.
Yeah.
And he's like, Pat, I like the idea. Why don't you email, you know, Rob Engie was his assistant at the time. Hey,
Yeah.
Rob, give it your email. Hey, Matt, write me the idea. Let me pray about it. Let me think about it. So
Right.
I did. You know, I wrote him the email, got an email back probably 2 days later from Rob saying, hey, listen, Daniel wants to meet with you. You know, you're up in Jacksonville. Can you drive down next week? So I said, yeah, sure.
Wow.
So
Beautiful.
yeah, so I ended up driving down, and we met for 30 minutes, and I kind of explained the idea again, and Daniel said, yes, like, let's do it.
Yeah.
So just to kind of summarize, I think it's like some of the lessons that I take away are this, you know, how do you say it? A lot of times it's the older spiritual brother, who kind of has favor, who ends up opening the door for his younger brothers and younger sisters to kind of step into new things.
Yeah.
But here it was reversed,
Yeah.
where my younger brothers and sisters are people that I kind of discipled in formative
Mm.
stages.
Yeah.
There was so much favor on them that it came to rest on me.
Wow, beautiful.
And other things too is that when I was loving on them, it wasn't so that I would one day get somewhere. It
Yeah,
was for the
right.
beauty of seeing them
Yeah.
know the Lord
Come
more.
on.
And so I think, I'll close this, and then maybe you go to another question, or kind of you take us where you want.
Sure.
But but I would say that you know yeah, for me, it's being present in like 2 to 3 minute moments with people. This
Mm.
is where all the gold in the kingdom is. A lot of times we think
Mm.
it's these huge crusade moments. It's
Mm.
these huge, maybe the pastor has it because he's there for a year in front of 400 people.
Mm.
He has a lot of treasure in heaven. But for me, like, he brought me into a revelation of, it's simply like being present with people and loving them with a pure heart.
Yeah.
And every time that like a Bible verse comes to your mind, a spiritual principle, maybe a point of action or a testimony, anytime one of those four things kind of comes to your mind, you just sow it out. And if we just steward these small moments well, like, you never know where it goes.
Yeah.
And again, I even put a like, I don't know, try to put a caveat on that by saying it doesn't always mean bigger ministry assignments or more people looking at you.
Right.
It something far different. It can mean
Yeah.
all of it. You end up in East Timor, and you're slain for the gospel, and you don't even know, but your death ends up sparking a move of God in Indonesia after
Yeah.
you're 10 years after you're gone. So
Right.
more, again, when we hear more as good Europeans, as good Americans, we always think, oh, there's more spotlight on you.
Yeah.
But in general, I think it's the beauty of simply loving the Lord, loving people,
Yeah.
and then letting His Spirit tug you in different directions. And so
Right.
I see that in my journey.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I think this is so interesting to listen into, actually, to hear the backdrop of everything that we see now. I want to know a little bit, like, at what point did you feel like that the vision for the fire camps really took a hold of you, and also kind of in the 𝗖𝗙 world, so to speak? Where did that really start to come wind in that sail, so to speak?
Yeah. So I remember, we agreed in September 2020, hey, let's go for this. And so we had planned 2 different camps in 2021.
Right.
One was in Austria that you were at, which was very special.
Right.
And then in Ukraine.
Mm.
And so, yeah, so, I kind of had a lot of time, those 6 months. And I remember even, driving down to Orlando, and it meant so much that you and all the heroes from the second year boot camp, like, that you, especially the Europeans, that you said, hey, listen, we're with you, Matt, like, we'll serve under you. And so, I would say at the first fire camp, we did it in Austria in 2021 in July. And I would say, like, in the course of that time, I began to realize, like, we're playing with fire here. Like, there is something here.
Right.
There's something with, combining, again, like, a heart to pursue the Lord, and not just making it about equipping, right? You can't, all the principles of how to preach the gospel, you can teach in a classroom format, with some exhibitions, in probably 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
But it's actually bringing people, like, taking them away from their schedules, bringing them into encounter for a week, and then seeing the Lord do individual things in their heart that maybe He's been wanting to do for years.
Exactly.
And then on top of that, in that place of, like, this beautiful, healthy heart that's been massaged for a few days by the Lord's presence, then beginning to implant, like, a deeper love for the gospel, like, and kind of these powerful, like this powerful wisdom from Reinhard, from Daniel, to preach.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, at that first one, I think it was like a revelation for me. And then the second one in Ukraine, also revelation.
Yeah.
And then so the next year, in February of 2022, the war in Ukraine broke out.
Right.
And then at that time, we kind of began to you'll probably remember that we began to call in a lot of the 𝗖𝗙 alumni, people who had done the boot camp, some fire camps, to that border area.
Right.
And for around 10 weeks, there were literally kilometer-long lines exiting Ukraine.
Hmm.
And for 10 weeks, we had teams there, and the teams would obviously help with humanitarian things. But one of the things that we began to do was to preach the gospel. Like, again, you have this crowd at all times there you had this crowd at all times.
Yeah.
And so seeing that this ability to not just share the gospel one-on-one,
Right.
but the ability to share it one on 50 at a time,
Yeah.
that this was actually needed on the earth.
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, that was the moment, when I was there, like on the border, in Ukraine, in February and March of 2022, where I realized this is going to be needed. This is needed now.
Yeah.
This ability to gather the attention of everybody, to
Yeah.
share either your testimony or a gospel story, to lead someone to a place of clear decision.
Yeah.
Like, this is needed now, and it's going to be probably needed even more in the future as the world gets more chaotic. And so
Exactly.
at that moment, I thought, like, I want to go all in for this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's beautiful. I think just like the heart of the fire camp, but also Jesus camp, it's like 4 to 7 days where you come together, as you say. And I think it's just such a beautiful, deep level that is laid down into the heart of anybody who will participate in this. And I think that is part of it. I mean, you really, what I've seen through these fire camps, Jesus camps, is really solid people coming out of this who know who they are. They know the Lord. They're head over heels in love with Jesus. They love family. And I think that is something that you also carry. There are many alliances or associations, and it's beautiful. We need that. But I think what you are stewarding so well, and what is really birthed into the fire camps and the Jesus camp, is the whole family aspect. Even like some of the slogans there is family armies, going out into war together, but truly that really loves the Lord and truly love one another, where we even give preference to one another, as the Bible tells us to do, right? It's not about who is who, in the Christian zoo, so to speak. And I just love how you are really bringing that into the dynamic, into the mix. Now, tell me a little bit. Okay, the training is quite intense. It's a deep. You go deep into the presence of the Lord, deep into actually preaching the gospel. What I've seen is also from there, it's really like a springboard also for many to step out into ministry or step out into their calling. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, the training is one side to it, but it's like a track, like a running track that is just forged out before those who are joining. So what can anybody who are going through this training, what can they expect in the aftermath?
I'll get to that in a minute. But as you were talking about family, I kind of also thought about something else that we could say. And that is, like, from the very beginning, like, one of the things that I wanted to kind of cut back on was this kind of mighty man of God syndrome, or kind of this green room kind of feel, where we've all been in different retreats, for example, like where, there's the 2 or 3 leaders. They kind of come in, they're probably 15 years older than everybody else, but they kind of come in, they have their sessions, and then they kind of disappear for a while, and you don't really get to know them.
Right.
So, and again, this isn't wrong. Like, I would say that, there are people that, like, the more you travel, I mean, as you and I both know, like, the more you do need times of rest, and the journey is tiring, and there's many different things. And so it's not that this is wrong or evil in any way. But there was a desire in me to kind of try to birth something else. And so, like, what we wanted to do was to really create family. I found that it was very helpful to actually have a family that then could host a family. And so even at that first, fire camp that we did, I think we had 15 leaders. We had around maybe 70 students. So 15 leaders. And again, the entire time we were with them, there was no real green room retreat. We ate with them. We got to know their stories. And we saw how, how people would actually receive more even over the dinner table, from us, as their hunger pulled out testimonies and deeper revelation. Also, too, I think we all saw how the students themselves, like, released Jesus to us as they shared different stories. And so in some ways, like, my goal was to demystify what it means to be a leader. Where the leaders would be together as older brothers and older sisters. We'd be relational. We would be open to even receiving from them. And I feel like that's something that I think has defined a lot of the leaders that have come and also the students that have come. And
Yeah.
I like to think that it's kind of turning the page on this other form. Again,
Yeah.
some context it's very valid and it's very needed. But really, we're more and more we realize, wow, we're older brothers and older sisters. We're running in the harvest together, and how beautiful it is that we can for a week get to know other brothers and sisters. There's no retreat,
Hmm.
and so I saw that as being very, very valuable.
Hmm.
Another thing as well is that what I also like, the more people you have, the more men and women of the Lord that are there,
Hmm.
um, the wider the DNA set that can be imparted into a people
Right.
group.
Hmm.
And so, if we have the one or two mighty men of God, the speakers that
Hmm.
come,
Hmm.
they're sometimes they're wider than you and me put together, Daniel. Like they're powerful
Yeah.
people, right?
Come on.
But even then, they're still limited.
Yeah.
They're limited in kind of what they can do. And so what I love is, at the fire camp, at the Jesus camp, how we can have someone like me whose life message is, intimacy with Jesus,
Yeah.
kind of share and really, I like to think, I mean, I'm not bragging on myself, I'm bragging on everybody else, but impart something like to them,
Yeah.
that lived out. And then we can turn the page and I can hand it over to someone like you
Yeah.
who lives out like the proclamation of the gospel.
Yeah.
And so we get, the more people we have, the deeper kind of the metrons that they walk in, a lot of
Yeah.
times the power, the grace, and so the impartation is greater into
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And so I would say there's a lot of different things that are happening in this ecosystem that
It's
maybe
true.
initially aren't identified, but I try to create it with intentionality.
Yeah.
And my heart is that, whenever Jesus camps and fire camps just become a page of history,
Yeah.
that there's a different idea of what it looks like to lead something,
Yeah.
and it to be done as family.
Yeah.
Another thing too is like in America, everything is done with such professionalism and kind of sometimes it can be overproduced.
Yeah.
We start to be run by the clock, and we start to be run by this or run by that,
Yeah.
and really where it's like, hey, listen, we have the schedule, but we don't serve the schedule. The schedule serves us.
Yeah.
It's flexible. There's family time. There's time for fellowship. And so, yeah, so these are just different things. So family, like one thing to realize too, it's a manifestation of the Holy Spirit
Mm.
that, you can have 5 people that have a common background that maybe even have some shared experiences, but you still don't have a sense of family
Yeah.
together. And then
Yeah.
you can have other people where we don't even have a shared background. We just met 2 days ago,
Yeah.
but we love the Lord, and He comes and marks us as family.
Mm.
And just realizing it's a manifestation of His Spirit. So in general, like yeah, these are just things that are very dear to my heart. And again, the Father wants us to host family. It's part of the inheritance that our older brother Jesus died for.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit about family. And now to
Yeah.
get to the question, though, about, okay, what happens afterwards?
Yeah.
And I would say, so yes, with the fire camps, yeah. So I ended up handing them over to CFAN more fully last year.
Right.
And again, it was my heart, to raise them up to be fully functioning without me having to be involved.
Yes.
And I would say, like, this is also something that we want to have as leaders. Like, success is actually where you have built something and you've made yourself redundant, where they don't
Yeah.
even need you anymore.
Mm.
And that's where, if you're getting your ego out of ministry, you won't allow that to happen. That
Mm.
maturation process can't happen.
Mm.
And so you want it to be really where, from the beginning, you're building this thing so that you are no longer needed.
Yeah.
Success is also where you've shared a wisdom or unique revelation on your heart so much that there comes a day where everyone, when they hear you say it, they say, "Oh, like everybody knows that. Like
Yeah.
that's so like so." Where you end up making yourself even silly,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's where again we have to have these small egos because otherwise we'll never really be successful.
Right.
So last year I handed it over, yeah, more fully to CFAN, the fire camp program.
Mm.
Great people running that: Lucas Reppert, Ingrid Schlott, Gary
Mm.
Smith. Great
Precious
people.
people.
Entire family team of 100 people that are leading it
Yeah.
under. And so, yeah, and overall fire camps, they're very much focused kind of on, I would say, on the first world. And so Evangelist Daniel Kalinda, like one of his main visions, although, they're present in other areas, but one of his main visions is to raise up, is to kind of locate office of the evangelist kind of people,
Yeah.
in different nations around the world. They probably speak English. They probably have some passports, and they probably have a vision
Yeah.
of doing crusades in their own nation, but also kind of in the 1040 window where there's
Yeah.
such a harvest.
Mm.
And so that's kind of, the fire camps are really focused on that. I mean, maybe Evangelist Daniel Kalinda can explain it in greater detail.
Mm.
but I began to talk to Daniel like last fall about there's so many different countries where they don't speak English. They're
Right.
never going to travel more than 100 kilometers from their area, but they are evangelists.
Come on.
And so the need for this kind of wineskin to go into these regions and equip them. And so that's where Jesus Camps came from. And I run Jesus Camps with 𝗖𝗘𝗪𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗥, a dear friend of yours and mine.
Precious
And also,
man of God.
yes.
Come
And also
on.
𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗃.
Yeah.
And so we're running these together as older brothers. And again, we have now, probably 100 people in our family. A lot of these people have come through, the boot camp or the SOEs or fire camps, but more and more, they're just coming through Jesus Camp.
Yeah.
And so this heart is to go into these regions and to multiply. And actually, so for example, it looks like this. The first Jesus Camp in a nation, we go in mainly as probably Westerners. We go in, there's 10 of us.
Yeah.
And we do, we raise up evangelists, and then the second Jesus Camp that we do, maybe 30% of the leaders are actually local nationals.
Right.
The third Jesus Camp, 60% are.
Yeah.
And we're, by, the fourth or fifth, iteration, that most of them are nationals, if not all of them.
Yeah, right.
And so what we want to do is we want to actually launch evangelism, equipping moves of God in these nations.
Beautiful.
And where we're doing them, from the beginning with denominations, the denominations, they can see it for the first time. They see the value in it.
Yeah.
And they take it in, and eventually we're no longer needed.
Yeah.
And so, which is, so
I want you to take me into Venezuela. So I have just heard some things and some rumors about what has taken place there. But I mean, I have you here now. So I want you to share the experience there, because I think that's like a prime example of what the Jesus camps can mean for a nation. I mean, they were I'm not sure exactly how it is right now, if it's still a lot of political unrest in the nation. But just before that, you and the team were launching off the Jesus camps there. Tell me that story, because it's very unique.
Yeah. There's such a wild story about how we even got invited into that nation with a small intercessory group in Valencia, Venezuela, standing on a word for 19 years. That whenever 𝗖𝗢𝗡 would come to Valencia, Venezuela, that revival would come to Valencia, to Venezuela, and to all of South America. Wow. So this was the word. For 19 years, they had a map that they would pray over of their city. And there were so many tears that were spilt on it that they had to laminate it. And so
wow.
kind of like in a movie scene, in December of 2023, they're getting together and they're praying, and somebody says, how many more years are we going to pray for this? Do we really believe it's going to happen?
You're right.
The next week, someone from 𝗖𝗢𝗡 is traveling through Valencia, Venezuela. Their car breaks down, and they end up staying with someone who's on this intercessory prayer team. And so basically, in February of last year, we did our first fire camp there, and it was a powerful time. We had apostles over hundreds of churches traveling in, and we had such demand on this thing. We had to tell people no, sadly. And there was one story of this apostle traveled from the farthest end of Venezuela there, and he said, listen, I'm over 100 churches. He's like, could I just like wash the toilets here and just sit in whenever I'm not working? Would that be okay? And we were like, you're not washing toilets, brother. You have a front seat.
Yeah.
But in general, so we did one turned into, I think last year we did 7. And by the 7th one, we had seen how most of the teachers by that time were people that had been through the first 4 or 5,
right. And
it started to do crusades and all this different stuff. So we saw this radical growth. So it led to, in our outreach portion of fire camps or Jesus camps, typically there's around 50 people that come to Christ. We send out around 60 evangelists on the streets, for around an hour and a half or 2 hours, and typically 50 to 60 people have come to Christ.
Yeah.
And in Venezuela, it was like thousands. Crazy. Where we would go on the streets with microphones, people with tears in their eyes, policemen. I mean, these are communist policemen.
Come on.
Like coming up with tears in their eyes, coming to Christ, and then saying, listen, can you say this again? Can you tell the same story? I'm going to call the other policemen over, because can you tell them the story? So wild things. And so then we saw obviously dozens of churches being planted from this.
Yeah.
We had a great brother named Benji Morph. He did church planting in Thailand for I think around 15 years with his family. And we had him come in, and he imparted more of the Father heart. He imparted more of discipleship multiplication strategies.
Yeah.
And so it's led to the explosion. I think there's like 50 or 60 known churches that have started.
Wow.
The main churches in this region and other regions like have expanded dramatically. So at the end of last year, we sent 2 of these Venezuelans to Cuba.
Yeah.
And they scouted out the island. We ended up doing something there this year in that beautiful nation. We also sent this team up to Colombia. They've done, I believe, 2 Jesus camps. So again, so the idea is to multiply. The idea is we
Yeah.
go in and we find people that the Lord has, they're walking in the office. They're mature people. They long to do more. And then somehow these Jesus camps, they act as accelerators.
Yeah, right.
We very consciously take the limitations off. I would say one of the things that 𝗖𝗢𝗡 walks in, Christ for All Nations walks in as an inheritance, is the ability to think big.
Right.
Is you can't be around typically a boot camper or someone who spent too long with 𝗖𝗢𝗡 and not have some boxes removed. And so people come to this fatherly atmosphere where the gospel's being preached, where there's family, and where lies are being confronted. And I feel like people are able to accelerate into, it could be, going to the old person's home in their own town. It could be doing youth crusades, going into schools, preaching the gospel. But that's what we've seen. So in short, that's the story of Venezuela. Things are, in July of last year, there was a lot of political stuff going on. Things had to shut down. And so we had to restart them. But yeah, I mean, the entire time the gospel's being preached, in weekend formats, discipleship multiplication all over the place.
Wow.
So yes, it's very beautiful.
So beautiful. And so through the fire camp, there are so many layers. It's all from, having these, all from apostles to the wash lady, so to speak, coming to be trained, right? And then from there, they launch into their world with just a sharpness also to the gospel, to actually the preaching, proclamation of the gospel. I really love that. Tell me just a little bit about these running paths, because one thing is on a regional and a national level, but many of those who have been through the fire camps and the Jesus camps, they end up even traveling across continents, preaching the gospel in different settings. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes. So again, fire camps and Jesus camps, I would say it's the same heart that's with them, but their goals are slightly different. Right. Where again, I would say, the fire camps, their heart is to raise up crusade evangelists from the first world, kind of for, the 1040 window. Yeah. And obviously with 𝗖𝗢𝗡 too, there's additional trainings. If you speak English, if you have a passport, you can raise some support or raise money. There's a School of Evangelism, which is a great program on how to do gospel crusade events in your own nation. They offer them in the UK and Frankfurt, in South Africa and Brazil, America. Yeah. And then obviously too, like there's the boot camp, which, it'll probably happen, I guess, every other year now moving forward, which is kind of like a bigger program for crusade evangelism internationally. Yeah. So that kind of that program. Along with that, there's something called youth crusades, which is, you go to a fire camp and you can go into additional training whereby you can begin to travel all around the world, primarily in South America, Africa, Asia. Yeah. You can go into schools and in 1 week preach the gospel in front of like 10,000, 20,000 school kids. Right, it's wild. Right.
Yeah. It's really powerful.
Yeah. So I would say like that's kind of a beautiful track. And I would say like it's impossible, I would say, to go to a fire camp and even just do youth crusades and ever be the same. Yeah. The amount of fear of man that's broken off, the amount of love for the Lord and seeing people filled with the Spirit, kids in Asia filled with the Spirit, right? Like it will forever change you. Yeah. And so there's that. And then, on the Jesus camp side, again, right now we don't have any additional programs, although we are building out a second track for Jesus camps where, if we go to the city again, there's people that want to just be in that atmosphere again. We're going to offer like additional teaching for them on, discipleship multiplication, on, how to do, how to pray for healing from the stage, some different things. And then after that, we're beginning to build up, we're calling them Jesus camp family networks, but they're relational families where we begin to take on vision together collectively, like with Zoom calls and personal meetups for sharing the gospel in different pockets of our communities, whatever that's like. And so, we just started Jesus camps last November, so we're not even a year old. Yeah. But we're seeing again this desire to meet, the desire to run like with other like-hearted evangelists, to run in
Right.
health.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so we're launching these Jesus Camp family networks,
Yeah.
and we're very much about like practical action,
Hmm.
and yeah, and then kind of helping these guys walk out their assignment in a healthy way.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this in Europe, and we still see it in a large way. I mean, even mentioning Matthias, from Finland, and
Mm.
also their brother Lucas Albertsen, firing
Oh,
off,
right.
the Come Alive concept, for example, in
Yeah.
Finland 2 years in a row, or was it three, where you had even people coming from the Netherlands, coming from Great Britain,
Yeah.
coming from all over that have been part of this training, who carry the same DNA. And because
Yeah.
family, because the relationship, they come over, 50, 60, 70 people to serve, to preach the gospel throughout the streets. They would not be the ones standing on the platform at the actual crusade event, but coming alongside serving. And I think that's
Yeah.
just such a beautiful, beautiful picture of what is
Yeah.
birthed forth through these camps, is this family collaboration across
Yeah.
borders, even in regions, also like in the nation, like Germany now is just all over the place. People are migrating left and right to actually take part in each other's dreams
Yeah.
and visions, and just seeing it come to pass. I think it's really, really beautiful to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe really quickly, so you come somewhere for a week where you feel love, and all of us have a lot that we carry. We have natural skill sets, I mean, spiritual graces that we carry, relational networks, finances, time, and basically you come into a place where the gospel is front and center, and where you feel safe, and essentially where the Lord begins to like launch a vision about something, and people willfully then begin to commit to help. Now, this has been so used and abused in the past by
Mm.
dynamic leaders who have a very bad heart, and they manipulate and they use people. But this is not what we're seeing.
Yeah.
We're seeing, again, for example, we can point out like Matthias Toivainen, like and Lucas Abildsten and all the other Finnish heroes that are up there.
Mm.
But it was a small core group like around 3 years ago that got a vision of
Mm.
doing an event, right, next to the Parliament building in Helsinki, right next to the main library there in the middle of Helsinki.
Yeah.
And how in the concept of family, the resources came for this, where you had one of the older brothers actually had just bought a stage.
Yeah.
And he said, listen, like, I can't pay for the gas to drive it from Germany up to you, but if you can pay for it, you can have the stage for free.
Yeah.
This is like, $50,000 stage.
Yeah.
Then we saw how other brothers had speakers, and then and then we called the 𝗖𝗙𝗡𝗪 technicians in the UK. They said, we'll come and help you.
Yeah.
And so you have the materials kind of coming from a place of family.
Yeah.
And then you have, they began to sew in, and they did a few fire camps. And then these young people, they would come through, and they would get to know Matthias, and they get to know Lucas, and they get to know these heroes.
Yeah.
And they'd say like, wait a minute, you're doing something for 4 days where you're sharing the gospel in my nation. I'm going to take off work, and I'm going to come.
Yeah.
And so the point is that I think they did this thing for like 15,000 euros.
Mm.
And they probably had 50 evangelists there that, for the whole week we're sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
To pay them on an hourly basis, to pay them all this different stuff, it would have cost, so much money to pay the real cost of all the equipment.
Yeah.
But in the concepts of family, I guess this is the conclusion. Whatever I have is yours as you use it for the King.
Yeah.
And you get it for free.
Yeah.
And there's trust because I know that you're a man of love.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think that why unity is so important, and an honest family is because it unlocks resources, and in that, new possibilities for radical expansion.
Yeah.
And so I would say fire camps and Jesus camps, they've tapped into this because I believe they have a pure heart, and they host family and the gospel.
Yeah.
And so they end up being these mechanisms whereby they're turning out people in Europe or their own nations for a local harvest. And so that's why I think that they have caught on, and it has been cool to see how things have kind of spun off of these relational networks, even individual fire camps, and how, and how this is fueling a harvest. The last thing I'll say too is what really brings me joy is there's so many people that come to these fire camps or Jesus camps, and they're not really being used by the church that much. Maybe they're an usher, maybe they help in the kids ministry, all of which is important, but they've shared the gospel, once a year.
Yeah.
We see afterwards how they begin to bring in I mean, tens of thousands of decisions,
Yeah.
how they're never the same. And it brings me joy to see people like, every father, you and I are fathers. We want our sons and daughters to live life of significance,
Yeah, right.
not from a place of pride, but from a place of they know that there's an eternal thing that they're doing now that a million years from now will still bring joy to their hearts and Jesus's heart.
Yeah.
And so the joy to see people step into that in a
Yeah.
greater way. And then lastly, I believe Europe or any continent, it has all the engine pieces in already alive today to have a Porsche engine of revival,
Yeah.
right? But they're dirty, they're separate, some of them are wounded.
Hmm.
And if we create these ecosystems where they can come in and they can come into healing and they
Right.
can have new vision,
Hmm.
that we can very quickly see a mass acceleration around the
Yeah.
world. So either that
Yeah.
is family gospel. All right, your turn, brother.
Yeah, no, it's really beautiful. I think it's really also like this is the kingdom of God, what you are
Yeah.
basically talking about right here, right?
Yeah.
Where it's brothers and sisters running alongside one another. And of course, we have a saying, I don't know if you do in the States in the same way in Norway, we say like the guy in the front among equals, basically.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
it's an idiom that we use in
Yeah.
Norway.
We
And
say
I
first among equals. Yeah, the first among equals.
the first among equals, that's
Yeah.
the correct way, but sometimes it is like that, but it's really, it feels like that in the family of the fire camps and the Jesus camps, and also the level of unity. I think it is really just extraordinary. I want you to talk to me about this because you've been managing to work across many different denominations and Christian tags, so to speak, where
Yeah, yeah.
without letting the vision stop the mission, not only your mission, but actually the mission of bringing the gospel to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you have learned about unity in the body of Christ through this journey, maybe even some of the recent things that you've done. Just like how you just have been bringing ends together for the sake of the preaching of the gospel and the heart of the Father into the mix.
Yeah, I would say there's a longing, I think, in my generation and maybe your generation, even in the generation Gen Z, probably Gen Alpha, that's coming up, to kind of see past some of the boxes that we placed on ourselves, like denominational labels, all of this. And I think we're coming to the simple place of like, do you know Jesus?
Yeah.
Do you love the gospel? And if the answer to both of those questions is yes, it's like, let's be friends. And really where we're, I almost think we're getting back to how things were in the book of Acts,
Come on.
where we weren't about, they weren't actively trying to grow like a structure or a denomination. They were simply sharing the gospel. They were going real relationship, and they grew structure to the extent that they had to keep up with what the Holy Spirit was doing. So I feel like this is kind of, it's a unique moment where we are. And again, there's a responsibility with that because we want to honor every house of God, every denomination that has such treasure in it.
Right.
But also too, I believe that there's a acceleration that's happening, and in that, yeah, it's simply about, do you really know Jesus and do you love the simple gospel? And so I find that whether I'm with Baptist
Yeah.
or Pentecostals, charismatics, or even charismatic Catholics,
Yeah.
that there are people that are coming together around that simple framework. And so, yeah, an interesting development that happened was around 2 years ago, I ended up running into a great man of God, Henry Capello, and his wife Sabina.
Yeah.
And Henry brought the charismatic renewal to Malta in 1969.
Wow.
And he was studying to be a Catholic priest at the time. And yeah, he ended up being led in a different direction. Eventually met his wife, but he's a charismatic Catholic, and he runs something called Global 2033, which is a group of, I think, 1,500 organizations around the world. Most of them are Catholic.
Wow.
That have a heart between now and 2033 in sharing the gospel to the entire Catholic world.
Praise
to
God.
giving all of them to have an encounter with Jesus and the simple gospel.
Yeah.
So I ran into him around 2 years ago in a coincidence, just spirit thing. And, basically he began to track with what God was doing with fire camps. What was fire camps at the time? And he said, Matt, like, would you help me equip the charismatic Catholic Church to preach the gospel?
Come on.
And, it's like, brother, yes, I will.
Yeah.
And so again, So this past week, I was in Salzburg, and we were at with an amazing charismatic Catholic community called Loretto.
Yeah.
They started in the late 1980s, but they walk with such an intimacy with the Lord. It reminded me of kind of a prayer house. I think all of us have been in different prayer houses, I think, around the world, but just a community that's focused upon adoration, focused upon the Lord. And in general, so they kind of hosted us at the base, and I just saw, as again, these beautiful charismatic brothers and sisters, priests, found kind of a new love, for the gospel,
Yeah.
a new understanding of, we can go out on the streets and we
Come
can
on.
preach the gospel from the microphone, and we can do
Wow.
it in a healthy way, not like a crazy street preacher. We can do it in a healthy way,
Yeah.
and we can see how young Austrians receive Jesus.
Yeah.
And so it was such an eye opener, for a
Wow.
lot of these brothers and sisters. But and also too, like, lastly, like, wherever I go, I'm looking for the beauty. I'm looking for Jesus in individuals and also
Yeah.
in communities.
Yeah.
So I'm not going and saying, okay, you're doing all these things wrong.
Yeah.
If I go to a Baptist church, I'm like, oh, I know Jesus is here. Where is he? If I go to a charismatic church, where is he?
Yeah.
And so I think this is I think humility is a big thing.
Mm.
And lastly too, I know sometimes we can have, Protestants are watching, and and sometimes they think, okay, how can you, we all have different conceptions of what are Catholics, I would say.
Yeah.
And I would just say this, if we look at the Protestant church as a whole, we can see there's a lot of beauty there. There's a
Yeah.
lot of help, but also too, we have sometimes idolatry of leaders.
Mm.
We have the prosperity gospel. We want more. We're going to use
Mm.
Jesus to get it.
Mm.
We have sometimes abuses. We have all kinds of different stuff. There's a lot of health and unhealth operating in
Yeah.
this ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I would say the Catholic Church has that exact same thing.
Right.
It has total cessationists. They don't believe in the gifts.
Yeah.
Then they have crazy charismatics.
Yeah.
But they kind of decided to stay together. And so I think it's a place of humility to say, hey, listen, we're going to look at them the same way we look at ourselves. And we're going to say that there are beautiful elements in that church, that they're not into idolatry. They love the Lord. And like, it's our job to reach out and to lock arms with these heroes.
Beautiful.
And so, yes, that's kind of, I think the governing principle is to stay humble. We never compromise, I'm not going to compromise the core principles of who I am ever.
Yeah.
I'd rather, break friendship if that's what it came to.
Yeah.
But also too, we're not going to let the pictures and the understandings that actually aren't accurate define them or us.
Yeah.
We're gonna look with the eyes of Jesus, and if we can see Jesus in them,
Mm.
and there's no strange things, then
Yeah.
like, let's be friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So
the last thing
beautiful.
I'll say too is, we've had some people come through. I'm excited about this. They came through the fire camp and a Jesus camp, and they're actually bringing this into very conservative denominations. People that don't speak in tongues,
Mm.
but they love to preach, but they can share the gospel.
Come on.
And so I think that's also a success. Copycats are the success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. I want to ask you, before we close here, I want to ask you, when you are standing where you're at now and looking forward, what do you see? What is next now for you, for the Jesus camps? What do you sense God is leading into now, into the future? And global evangelism, like, what do you see? What do you dream about looking into the future?
Yeah, I would say, like, for me, like, typically, I would say this, it's kind of like when a 20-year-old hears, okay, what is their calling? They're thinking, okay, what will I be doing when I'm 42? And it's like, well, I'm 42. Like, am I living out the full extent of my calling? So for me, I'm always typically focused, like, in the next 6 months, like this time period.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I can be faithful to this moment, then 3 years from now, I get to where I'm called to. And so that's kind of where my attention is right now. And and so I would say with that, like, I'm trying to identify, okay, Lord, what are you doing? Like, how are things naturally growing, like, around me, without me trying to press too much into it. So what are you naturally doing? Where is your wind blowing? I'm kind of identifying those things, and I'm like, okay, Lord, how can I partner with you in this?
Yeah.
So again, one of the things that we see are a lot of people coming to the Jesus camps and wanting to stay in friendship and family.
Yeah.
And so that's where, again, this idea of the Jesus Camp Family Network is coming into being. And so we're letting him build the structure. We're identifying it. We're trying to keep track with what he's doing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this. I would say, like the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, the theory of war is changing on the battlefield every few months.
Yeah.
When the war started, no one thought that drones would play the role that they're playing, right? So it's kind of like, so you have to adjust to events on the ground, and you can't just fight with World War II military technology. You have to be, and so I would say for me, the key variables are like not thinking too far ahead, identifying things here, and then identifying what he's doing, and then blessing those things, and trying to build structure that by no means harms what he's doing. There's a tendency, I would say, in the body of Christ, when something begins to be grow exponentially, grow in a crazy way, that we can't wait as ministers to get our dirty little claws on it, and try to claim all the fruit for ourselves in a way. And I would say that, again, where it's like, hey, listen, like I don't want to do that. Lastly, it's like, okay, what does success look like for Jesus camps? I would say, like, for me, if 5 or 10 years from now, maybe Jesus camps exist or doesn't exist, I don't really know. But what as an entity, as something that people can point to. But if 5 or 10 years from now, there's 10, 20, 30 countries that have equipping moves of God that maybe found their beginning with one person that came to a Jesus camp, and they just kept going. We encouraged them, or we even launched them, and they're operating. And the people that are sitting down 10 years from now in Paraguay and Brazil, wherever they are, Moldova, they never knew Matt McClusky. They never knew Matthias Toivonen or 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗘𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗥. If they saw us on the streets, they would want to share the gospel with us. Like, for me, that's success. So making ourselves redundant, and maybe it's still around. Maybe there's still a use for us. But the last thing I want to say is this. I want to just thank everybody who's ever helped at a fire camp or a Jesus camp. You guys are the heroes. Like in some ways, I feel like I'm just someone who, kind of, although I am physically present I have been physically present at many fire camps, at many 𝗓𝗪𝗪 camps, but I would say, like, I'm an older brother of younger brothers and sisters who are my heroes. They're the ones that are raising money to go on their own. No one's ever been paid for one Jesus camp, for one fire camp, as far as I'm aware. They go on their own. They take time off work. They take time away from other ministry opportunities, and they go for one purpose: to see the gospel raised up in men and women around the world. And these guys are the heroes. I mean, if I started naming names, I could name 100 and I still forget 100. But if you've ever helped, like, please know that I speak of you. And one day in heaven, when we're before the Father, he's going to call us all up, and I don't know how it's going to be. But my reward will be the same as your reward. And for me, this brings me great joy. I look forward to that day when I see them all up there. And it excites me.
Praise God. How can anybody join Jesus camp, fire camp?
Well, so for fire camp, I'd recommend going, if you're in Europe, to 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗘𝗪. There still are a few more fire camps coming up this year. And if you watch this thing 6 months from now, there'll be more coming up, I believe. So 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗪. In the US, I think it's 𝗖𝗢𝗡.org. But I'd encourage you, if you have a heart to share the gospel, like, go to this thing. You'll be transformed. I encourage you, if you're watching this and you've done a fire camp, but you haven't done youth crusades, to jump into that pipeline. Youth crusades, it's a leadership development school in motion. That's what it is. And for Jesus camps, we have JesusCampMovement.com or .org, I believe. And so just you can type in Jesus Camp Movement. It'll take you there. Lastly, you can message me on Instagram. It's my Instagram is @Matthew MATTHEW MCCL. Be like, hey Matt, I saw the YouTube video. How can I help? And so I would just say, we need people. And again, like, if you're an evangelist, maybe you haven't done CFAN training. We still would want to work with you. We want you to run with our family. We love you.
Yeah, come on, it's beautiful. I will actually drop the links to these things also in the information on this podcast for you guys to pop in there. If this is something that you desire, I mean, as Matt is saying, this will transform your life and potentially, literally, millions of other lives as well. So I'm just so stoked, so thrilled, and I'm so thankful, Matt, for having you on here today to just share some of the heart behind the Jesus camps, the fire camps. Literally, through this, for anybody who listens, there has been millions. I don't know how many. Do you have a count of that? Millions have heard the gospel turned to Jesus because of this, fatherly training into evangelism? Do you have any idea or a ballpark?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know because, but I would say it's probably around 5 or 6 million people.
Yeah.
So the idea, it looks like this. People that came to a fire camp or a Jesus camp, and they often then begin to do things in their own nations, or they
Right.
begin to do a lot of school ministry in other nations of the world. And so I think we've had probably 5 or 6,000 people come through these two programs. Again, they just started in 2021.
Yeah.
They 4 years ago.
So beautiful.
And we've seen, such richness, but it's glory to the Lord.
Amen.
And again, his heart to multiply, his heart to break off all the fear of man and to propel us into the beautiful harvest fields that are white with harvest.
Praise God. Yeah, the time is short. Jesus is coming back soon, and I think really this is really part of just putting on the rocket boosters to get things rolling. Also, when it comes to bringing the gospel out into the nations. Beautiful. Thank you so, Matt, for all your wisdom and insight that you've been sharing with us here today. If this episode has inspired you, please share it with others who can benefit from it. Leave a review and stay connected. And until next time, keep your fire burning and continue to fill sections in heaven in Jesus' name. Matt, we love you. God bless you. And God bless you guys. Thank you so much for today.